everyone, and welcome back to my channel. It has been a little while since my last video, and if you're watching this video, you've probably seen my previous one that was a little bit over a year ago, which I can't stand to watch anymore, so I had to make this again. My art practice has changed a lot. If you did watch my old one, you'd probably know that. I don't know why anyone watched that video. It's my most popular video, and it's just not good. I wanted to remake this. I wanted to keep it short and sweet for you. I want to give you things I've picked up on, things that I've learned. The reality is that I think I've improved my practice, and I've, picked up on some things I learned from other artists, from videos. I recently watched some of Casey Bowell's oil painting courses, and just some things that I've picked up on that I've incorporated into my own practice and how I work larger scale now. So let's get into it. The first thing that you're gonna need when you're painting is obviously, let's start with some paints. I just have a container that is filled with all the paints that I use. Mainly my number one is Winsor & Newton, and that you can find fairly affordable prices for Winsor & Newton paints. I just use the Winton collection, Winton oil color. These are ones that I've used even throughout college. I mentioned Artist Loft in the Artist Loft, if you're Artist's Loft in the previous video, and those are good if you're on a budget and you haven't started. And I would recommend like a monochromatic palette. Start with like a phthalo ultramarine blue, white, and Mars black, and start with a couple colors, see how they work, and go from there. You can also use an alizarin crimson. If you're just starting out, how I learned in college was we got a raw umber shade, and that was used, a burnt umber, and that's used for your underpainting with white. So burnt umber, white, cadmium red light, a cadmium yellow light, a yellow ochre, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, viridian green. I like olive green. But like I said, you can kind of experiment with what colors you want. Just get a basic amount. Get definitely a yellow, red, and blue, whatever shade that you'd like. I also like Prussian blue a lot, but honestly, it's kind of like when you start to develop your style, you'll go towards and from certain colors, and you just kind of base them off of the style that you're particularly going for. So I would recommend Winsor & Newton. They're my favorite brand. I also have Gamblin colors, which are amazing as well. I have I think Payne's Gray, ultramarine blue, and a couple other ones. So I kind of go in between Winsor & Newton and Gamblin, but it just depends on what I'm looking for. The next thing is brushes, and I did mention that I do have very, very cheap brushes that are like acrylic, and I still use those for a majority of my paintings. But I recently invested, if you're interested in some nicer brushes, I would recommend, these are Rosemary & Company brushes, and they're about $3 each, and they're based out of the UK, the company. And I got some ivory flats and some sable 99s, and the pure sable 99s, these were recommended in Casey Bowell's video, so I got them, and definitely huge increase in quality, and I'm gonna definitely order more of them. They're very, very good. So these are the Rosemary & Company brushes. I would recommend, check them out. I'll put the link to these brushes in the bottom. These came to like $30, which isn't a lot, less than buying them in Michael's. Another tip for oil painting, I use makeup brushes now. So this is a face brush by Elf. Elf has some good ones if you want to get some blending, if you want to blend. These are a couple dollars each, and they wash very well in the paint thinner whenever I wash my brushes. I also have a foundation brush, and it stays relatively soft. So these two are favorites of mine. But like I said, I also get the cheaper brushes that are acrylic. It all depends on what you like and how much you're willing to spend on brushes. Next up is palette knives. I use this Artist Loft palette knife that is shaped like this. It is cheap, and I should order a new one, but I just have not. This is just Artist Loft, and I use it to mix all of my paints. I do not use this to scrape off anymore. I just use it to mix my paints. I've used this so many times, it's like worn out at this point, but this is my favorite one. I use it to mix all of my paints. A new thing that I use on my palette now is this glass scraper. And I learned this through a Casey Bao video. You scrape off the bottom of the palette with this and your day will be so much easier. I used to complain in my last video about cleaning and be very, very not clean with anything, and that was not good. I used to use palette paper. I now use glass, but I'll get into that. And basically what you do is you just put it along the glass if you're using glass, and you just scrape off all of the paint. This can also be used as a palette knife, but this is very sharp. Just be careful, and it looks like this. I also have one that's not as strong, and I bought that one too, but I end up not using it. I just use this one, but I will list the other one as well. I just got this from my local hardware store for about $5 to $7. This is my palette. Now my palette has changed throughout the years, and honestly, I've gone through many palettes. I've gone through palette paper. I've gone through wooden palettes. I've used pretty much everything that you can think of except glass. And I saw a couple artists on Instagram using glass, and it's just, I was confused how to use it. And I was like, wow, that's a really smooth surface. I'm sure that they can mix very well. And I love it the most out of all of my palettes. This is what mine looks like. It is a piece of tempered glass. I put paper on the bottom, a nice shade of, it's actually just like packing paper, craft paper. It's just, you know, a neutral tone. You can put black and white if you'd like to like judge between your darkest and your lightest. You can put it underneath the glass so that it's not just like glass over top. But I like the neutral tone. I can really get the true colors, and I do also, I can scrape this all the way through and it would be cleaned. I try to use the paint as I go and not let it sit for too long, or it's not as good on the canvas. But this is what I use. I wrapped the paper around and taped it, and I clean it off and keep it clean. Even though it doesn't look that clean, it's pretty clean for right now. I bought that piece of glass at Home Depot for about $4. So you can go through them relatively quickly or keep them clean. I like glass best, and honestly, it works the best out of any other palette that I've used. Let's get into some of the questions that you're probably wondering. One of them being, how do you rinse your brushes? What mediums do you use? This was a topic in my last video that I wanted to address very vividly, because I hadn't talked about this, and all I've been using previously has been Liquin, Winsor & Newton Liquin, which I know is very toxic if you're not using like a well-ventilated space, which quite honestly I wasn't, and I'm probably susceptible to all of those toxins because I lived in a very small apartment recently. So just be careful if you're working in a small space. Do not use Liquin without any like fans or open windows that allow for air ventilation. I mean, it can be dangerous. I'm not trying to scare you, but I also want to warn you, because in my last video I didn't. But you should be fine if you open a window. But like I said, disclaimer, I don't have all of the disclaimer things to tell you whether or not to use it or not. Liquin is good to use over top, and this is what the Liquin original looks like. I don't use it as much in my paintings anymore. It is more expensive than what I now use, which is a mix of stand oil and Gamsol. And I switched. You can layer Liquin for detail work on top of your painting. This is Gamblin Gamsol, and stand oil by Gamblin. This takes a little bit longer to dry. However, with the mix, you mix 50% of this with 50% of stand oil. Why? Stand oil is thick like honey. It literally is like honey, and it will take so long to dry if you didn't mix it with some paint thinner. And Gamsol is odorless mineral spirits, basically. It's an odorless mineral spirits, basically just paint thinner. And you can use this to clean your brushes. And this mixture is recommended. Dries in about a day and a half for me. Personally, it depends how thick you lay it and how much of a ratio you're using. This will slow the process of drying. However, it is so much more spreadable, and like, I don't know. I love it so much more. I work larger scale, and it takes a lot less of this than of the Liquin for me personally. So I also recommended last time that you clean your brushes with soap. I do not recommend that. Even Murphy's oil soap, it takes too long to really clean them off. So therefore I don't use it anymore. And I wouldn't recommend it to anybody, to be honest. I would recommend any type of odorless mineral spirits. All you have to do is mix your brushes in this, the paint will come right off and you're good to go. So much better at cleaning my brushes now. And it's so much less of a headache than mixing water, and oil is just not meant to mix with water. Another medium that I forgot to mention, if you want a medium that's gonna thicken up the oil paint, Liquin Impasto, use this. This will apply it so thick and it'll allow it to mix and apply freely, and you'll love it so much. Highly recommend Liquin Impasto for the textured pieces, and you just mix that and it's like a very jelly consistency. I put my medium, these are little candles. They're actually candles that I ordered off of Amazon. I actually have one lit currently back here, and I just scraped it out, and they're perfect for holding. This is Gamsol, and the Gamsol and stand oil mixture, I will mix a tablespoon of each and put it in here, and that'll be my medium. And make sure that you cover it so that it doesn't dry up. And these have perfect lids for that. As you could probably just tell, it just closed perfectly. You can't buy, oil containers, just type it in on Amazon, but they do cost more. My pack of like 20 candles was like $10, and I will use those forever now. I also have something to put my Gamsol in, my paint thinner, and then I just mix my brush around in here, clean it off, and that's perfect to rinse my brush in. These things are great if you get them at Michael's. They have wiring at the bottom, and you just put the paint thinner in, put your brush in, and it'll come off. And the little wire mesh mine needs to be, I just need to get a new one because it's ridiculous, but you just wash the brush in this. If your brushes are absolutely horrid, like it's been years since you washed them, it's been days, use some acetone. Fingernail polish remover, and try and scrape it off, and it might work. That's like the last line of defense for me, but if your brushes are that bad. Paper towels. Now I know this isn't the most eco-friendly, but it is so important. The number one thing that I've probably learned from painting and taking my art practice a lot more seriously is keeping your space clean. The more organized you are, even if the painting is really messy, stay organized, keep your palette organized. It'll convey in the painting that you knew what you were doing. If that makes sense. The more organized you are, the better, in my opinion. I just take paper towels, if you can find them now. It's still quarantine, so who knows how, just use a little bit. We're really rationing out here with the pandemic, but I just rinse my brushes off, or I wipe them as I paint, and this just keeps my brushes clean. I'm sure I could use cloths, but I'm using paper towels currently. Another tip, get a ruler like this. This is just a metal ruler. It even has like a little mesh. And whenever you're painting, put your arm on this, rest it against the painting, and don't poke a hole in it, but put it like on the wall against the painting. And basically you can paint like this, and your arm will be steady, so that if you're working, you don't have to worry about putting your arm on the wet paint. It's just a little helpful tip. I mentioned this in the last video. If you want to save paint, get yourself one of these little things. This is like a paint tube twist thing, and you put it on the tube, twist it, and the paint will come out if you can't get the paint out. And then for painting, you can get an easel that sits on the actual desk. You can get a stand easel, which I now have, now that I have space. You can use the wall. I just put a nail in the wall and I hang my canvases at different heights. If you like to paint directly on, which I actually like better, is painting directly on the wall whenever it's vertical. I tend to like that better. You're gonna need canvases, you're gonna need wood board. I buy my canvases off of Blick. I go to Michael's still because of the coupons, and sometimes like during quarantine I just went there to get them. But Blick has some affordable prices at a very low price point, so you can buy in bulk and they're lower in price. So Blick is a good website and they arrive very early. Mine arrived fairly quick. You can order off Michael's. I know there's a bunch of sales with quarantine and a bunch of you can get canvases very, very cheap. But I like to use canvas. I mentioned wood board. I do use wood panel occasionally. But yeah, I mainly like canvas. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you so much for your support. If you do want to support my Patreon, link is below. Sign up, go to my website if you'd like to see my newsletter. I do have prints and everything available. And I think that it's important to just know what you're doing. And I'm going to experiment with more and more oil mediums, but those are the ones I'm personally using that I thought would be helpful for you. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Sending all my love, and take care of yourself, and happy painting.